What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Book Binge on the King Crusoe YouTube channel. This week is episode 20, and we'll be covering The Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton, which is the first of the 3 books in this hardcover collection that I have. This is actually my first Michael Crichton book review, which has been several months coming since I actually first read this book way back in January, but that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles, I guess. This is actually not my first Michael Crichton read, not the first Michael Crichton book that I've ever actually read. I did several years back read Jurassic Park and The Lost World. I remember really loving them, even though I don't remember them that much. So just bear in mind that I'm not going to be comparing this book to either of those, but I will be making some observations and whatnot that some people might ask, like, well, if this is your first Michael Crichton book, how would you know that? It's not. I've read Michael Crichton before, just not a whole lot. As far as I've heard up to this point, The Andromeda Strain is not one of Michael Crichton's most mixed-reviewed books, but I had definitely heard 1 or 2 times that it was a little bit rough around some of the edges before I read it. I didn't hear that it was bad, but I heard that it was probably on the lower end of the spectrum, just that most people enjoyed it, but not necessarily much more than that. How do I feel about the book? Well, let's kind of find out about that. What are some of the best elements of the Andromeda Strain? First of all, and perhaps the thing that Crichton is most known for, outside of, Jurassic Park generally speaking, the science and the scientific elements. For me, being a total nerd who loves to learn on his own time and things that he's actually interested in, I've got to say that for me personally, there's nothing more satisfying, to be genuinely honest, than fun, interesting, understandable, and enjoyable math and science in a book. Like the way that Michael Crichton writes his science and the math and, the technical stuff that most people would find boring in any other circumstance is just something that I find so satisfying, just because I am a nerd and I love to learn when it's something that I'm interested in. And if I'm reading a Michael Crichton book, I'm interested in what that book's about. So that's just kind of my way of seeing things. One of the greatest things about the way that the science works in the Andromeda Strain especially is the way that it fills out the story. Even short time periods can feel really real and almost like real time, or at least feel a lot more immersive when there's a lot of this kind of filler material that isn't acting as filler. It's part of the importance of the plot and the story that's going forward, but it can make a short time period feel like a natural space of time. There's simultaneously a lot happening and also kind of not much happening at the exact same time, and that juxtaposition that is filled with the science and those elements and stuff like that just works super well. The intrigue and the questioning that is developed in the beginning of this book is quite good, in my opinion. At the start of day 1, or the beginning of the book, you're just kind of thrown right into the thick of things, and it makes you question what's happening and want to know more about why it's happening. It's a little bit confusing at the start, I guess, in a way. The way that things are kind of laid out, you're just like, well, what in the world is going on? But that's kind of the purpose of the intrigue. I like the way that it's built out and developed, especially when you start getting into day 2, especially. When things start to ramp up and the plot kind of starts to take a real shoot upwards, the rest of the story is just super, super satisfying. As I'm pretty sure is a consistent thing throughout a lot of Crichton's books, although I'll have to read more to find out, The Andromeda Strain is very much a plot-centered story. The focus of the entire book is the plot and kind of the underlying meaning of what's going on. So it's about a mysterious, possibly foreign bacteria that seems to be extremely deadly and needs intense and immediate study by some of the top scientists in the United States in some various fields to be able to get an understanding of and to hope to contain. I'm not going to say much more than that because this is a spoiler-free review. That's basically just the outline of what the book's about in one sentence. And as more and more things over the course of the book are discovered and revealed about the situation that these characters find themselves in, the better that it gets. Like I said, the intrigue is built up and started right from the very beginning, but everything intensifies as time goes on. It doesn't, you don't get many answers. The answers that you tend to get for questions that you have about things that are happening tend to be more questions that make you more interested in what's going on. Like, it's kind of weird to describe it that way, because you're just like, well, if I want to know the answer to this question, why would I want to have the answer to that just be another question or something like that? It's just kind of the way that science works, to be honest. It's just kind of the way that it works in this book. The way that science really acts, the way that scientific study is supposed to be seen and interpreted is questions. Science is about asking questions and testing those, and testing those hypotheses, testing the theories that you have about answers to those questions, and being surprised by answers to those questions is oftentimes the best result that you can get, because that shows that it wasn't a biased result. The way that the science works in this book very much suits that. You just have questions about what's going on, and you're following these characters as they're doing these tests to try to answer those questions. And like I said, those questions just lead to more questions until the very end, and it sets up this very well paced story to me. I think I might have mentioned this at one point, but maybe not. The tension that mounts up is just done beautifully. The last 100, the copy that I have here, the Andromeda Strain, is about 230 pages of the book, I think. The last like 60, well, the last like 80 pages or so just skyrockets in terms of tension. Just kind of the way that things mount up, like I said, is very beautiful in this book. I honestly can't really say much more than that. The great things that exist in this book without going into full spoilers, so I'm not going to go into those things. Just that the book held my complete attention for the entire way through. So now that we've gone over all those things, what are some of the worst elements of the Andromeda Strain? Well, the same thing as the first item in the best elements is the science. This is the first novel that Michael Crichton wrote under his own name, and people have frequently said that it's a little bit rough around the edges. Well, for the science, that's a little bit true. There are a couple points throughout the book, especially in the first 50 pages or so, that get a little bit info dumpy, at least a little bit more info dumpy than some people are going to want to handle. In my opinion, it's not horribly info dumpy, but that is just a warning. There are a couple sections where the explanation of the science and whatnot isn't quite as smooth as it is in some of the future work, like I have experienced in Jurassic Park or something like that. That's not to say any of it is bad, though. In fact, I'm pretty sure Michael Crichton acknowledged in the acknowledgments of this book or something like that, that the story was going to be one that some people are going to have a little bit of trouble getting through, that he tried to condense and explain the science in as straightforward a manner as possible, but with the subject matter of this book being a mysterious bacteria, there, like I said, there are a couple sections that are a little bit info dumpy. They just tell you a lot of things, and you just kind of have to, absorb them. It's not nearly as bad as it could be, but that is something that a couple people might struggle with. Probably the biggest criticism that I heard about this book before I read it was that the characters are flat, or that they're not very good, that Crichton's character work in some of these early books wasn't that great. Well, I can kind of see where that's coming from. Something about the characters in this book is that they are a little bit flat. They don't develop a whole lot through this story. But there are a couple reasons for this. I personally really liked all of the characters. I thought that they were differentiated very much well enough for the purpose of the story. Like I said, this is a plot-focused story. It's much more intent on studying the actual story of the book rather than the characters within the book. So for me, these characters definitely fit well enough to push the story forward in that manner for me. And in regards to flatness and character arcs and stuff like that, well, of course there aren't that many character arcs. This book takes place over the course of like 5 days, so there isn't basically any character development outside of maybe one of the characters who is vital at the very end of the story. But for the most part, I can see where the criticism of the character work not being the best comes from, but to me, for this book at least, the character work doesn't really matter this much. Like, the characters are differentiated perfectly enough for you to know who's who, and that's about all you need for the purpose of the book. So some people might have trouble with that, especially if they care more about characters than anything else, but it's not bad enough to completely ruin the story at all. And then perhaps the biggest criticism, in my opinion, the thing that I enjoyed the least, was probably the ending. The ending isn't bad, In fact, I actually quite enjoyed and really appreciated and loved some of the decisions that were made in regards to the ending, and thought that it was very satisfying on a foundational level. But I will say that the problem that I had with the ending, that it was a little bit rushed. It felt a little bit too short. The last like 5 pages of the book could have been, 10, maybe even 15 pages, and the story would have felt a little bit more complete and wrapped up a lot better as a result. So that's probably my biggest gripe, is that the ending is a little bit rushed. But other than that, I really enjoyed everything about the book. The Andromeda Strain is a very worthy technical debut for Michael Crichton and what he would become. And it has everything that I felt that I could, at this point in time, expect from him based on expectations and my experience with him in the past. Definitely a good book, and it makes me very much excited to read some more of his books and kind of see where he goes from there. But I guess that'll do it for this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Ring the bell if you want to get notifications for any future videos that are coming up. In next week's video, I'll actually be discussing movie adaptations versus books. That's going to be a kind of fun non-book review book binge episode. So if you want to see that, like I said, like and subscribe and ring the bell so that you don't miss it when it comes out. Check out seasonalproductions.com for a great backlog all in one place of all of my video content as well as all of my writing content that I do. So if you want to check any of that out, bookmark seasonalproductions.com and you'll be good to go. That'll do it for this video. Come back again next week, like I said, for a non-book review but book-related episode. I will have a lot of fun with that one. So I'll see you guys next week.